How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this week's astrological report. This is for June 30 through July 6 of 2026. I hope you're all doing well. This week, we have a few interesting dynamics playing out, including now that Jupiter is in Leo for the next year, it's making a perfect square to Chiron that is just ingress Taurus. So we haven't felt this before. This is something very new. However, we already have been in the Jupiter square Chiron phase. It's just been from the sign of Cancer and Aries. So they've just both shifted into this new dynamic, new flavor of what this aspect is talking about. And it is a first quarter square between these two, the crisis in action based on the conjunction when Jupiter was conjunct Chiron in Aries back in 2023. And that started off a brand new cycle about Jupiter and Chiron. So I'll be speaking about that aspect. It is coming exact here on Wednesday, July 1st, tomorrow. So that's one major thing going on. But it's also the end of this square between these two. And Jupiter will then be moving on away from that. So it's kind of new, but it's also the end of something. All right, so there's that aspect. And then we also have something even more rare here, and that is Mars reaching the perfect conjunction with Uranus in Gemini. We haven't seen this conjunction in Gemini basically for about 79 years. It was post-World War II, the last time they made this conjunction. Last time they were here, it was also ruled by Mercury in Cancer. Now, this particular one is being ruled by Mercury retrograde. In fact, even Mercury is still stuck at 26 degrees where it's stationed retrograde, so it's still having to build up momentum backwards. So it's still kind of just stuck there in the sky from our perspective, not really moving, amplifying this conjunction even more so. There has been a couple events, in the past. We also saw in 1944, of course, that was the war, beginning, a lot of different campaigns that were beginning to start that would end up, bringing the war to a close. So it's kind of a liberating energy as well, but it's pretty chaotic. There's no way around it. And back in 1944, it was like January 15, I believe, there was a pretty big earthquake in Argentina. It killed over 10,000 people. Of course, we've already been seeing earthquakes this past week and building up. There's been a lot of them. I think that this conjunction already applying towards the perfect conjunct is talking about that. Plus Jupiter at the last degree could also be showing some of these earth events, building up. But there's basically instability. There's volatility that comes along with this conjunction. And it does have an impact on homes and families because it's being ruled by Mercury in the sign of Cancer. So there's more unpredictability that could be showing. Now, not every conjunction will show some major event right on the day. It's still possible. We'll take a look at the exact conjunction and what else is going on while this is happening. But it's also the beginning of a cycle. Every conjunction is a brand new cycle between the two planets. So Mars is about a 2-year cycle. So that means this conjunction is going to seed some kind of energetic drive for people for the next 2 years, 2 to 2.5 years of what type of action we're going to be taking rooted here in the sign of Gemini. So I'll be speaking about this in the report in this video and letting you know how I'm seeing it. It's still also within orb of the nodes of fate. So a lot of these things can be fateful and have long-term effects on the future, put the world at this crossroads that's been building up and ongoing in different ways. It also affects travel, transportation, media, and most importantly, the local environment. That's where the craziness is at. The streets, just the surrounding areas of homes and families, a lot of unpredictability. There's also, this is fire season in North America here and in the Northern Hemisphere. So, even all these fires that are popping off in the local areas are affecting homes because, again, it's ruled by Mercury in the sign of Cancer. And Mercury stationary, again, is not the most helpful for this. It can amplify these dynamics to be even a little more unpredictable. So we'll be looking at that. That conjunction is perfect on July 3, late at night on July 3 on the West Coast. So it'll be officially July 4th, early morning for other places in the United States. And, we can consider it all day, building up July 3rd and all day on July 4th. It's pretty strong, and it's already strong now, building towards this conjunction. It's applying towards it. So it really shows that it's not just necessarily right when it's perfect on late July 3 into July 4. These things can pop off at any moment throughout the week that, again, I think have already been shown, building up in the background with a lot of chaos in the world, a lot of unpredictability in the world. So that's something that we have going on there. But at the same time, it still has a liberating vibe about it. Again, in the past, last time World War II was happening, it's not the reason for World War II. World War II already started by the time that this transit came in. This transit was a big part of, the Allies being clever and a lot of new things, a lot of new technologies, trying out new techniques and, tactics. And also, it was liberating. It was about to liberate the world based on what was happening, that led to World War II. So there's liberation vibes about it for sure, but that can also stir up the background energy for people to be more rebellious, to be looking for revolution in different ways. But this is also an air sign. It's up in the head a lot. It's mental energy. It's communications. So it's a lot about ideas that are going to be stirred up that Mercury retrograde will then kind of reevaluate, rethink, and again, how it affects your home life, your family life, your foundation, and your safety and your security and your comfort will be a part of it because of the Cancer connection. And then wherever the moon goes will also play a role. Since the moon is in charge of Cancer, where the sun is and Mercury retrograde is, that's ruling this conjunction of Mars, Uranus. So we'll look at that. All right, so again, that's going to be later in the week, around July 4th, the holiday here, that we have that conjunction. We also have Jupiter and Leo making an in conjunction to the North Node. So the nodes of fate have also reached 0 degrees now until they change signs. And that shows that we're at this last critical phase of the Virgo-Pisces axis of destiny that's coming in, that Mars is triggering already right now in a T-square. And then the nodes will change signs into, not this week, but they will be into Aquarius and Leo. All right, so there's that. The Jupiter in conjunct to the North Node will be some sort of an adjustment that we have to make between these two different energies, Leo versus Pisces. And I'll speak on that in this video. We also see that Mars will then enter the rare minor grand trine for the world. We see it already, this minor grand trine with Neptune at the apex. Neptune sextile Pluto. Neptune and Pluto have been in a sextile for decades in different signs, throughout different signs. So that's nothing new, but they are new in these two signs. But Uranus is the new part coming into Gemini here, forming one of the angles of the minor grand trine. And now Mars coming into this is also going to be triggering and activating what this world minor grand trine is all about. Now, this isn't just a one-day thing, this minor grand trine. This is something much bigger for the next 2 years that the world is coming into. This new configuration is kind of an alliance, basically, between Aquarius, Aries, and Gemini. And so as Mars comes into this week, it's going to really bring it down to earth more, into our everyday reality, and kind of show and activate a lot about what this new world dynamic is talking about. And we're going to see it get activated in multiple ways throughout the months and the next couple of years. But this is just one part of the activation. And when it comes to this minor grand trine, and a lot of people are also calling it a basket because of Jupiter coming in, kind of, it looks like a little bit of a basket there with the configuration. Jupiter's a pretty quick activation of the basket part about it, but so it's mostly the minor grand trine. So the planets that are really in charge of this minor grand trine and what the world is kind of be connected to in this new way, it's the rulers of those three signs. So Saturn is in charge of Aquarius, Mars is in charge of Aries, and Mercury is in charge of Gemini. So we have Mercury, this lower planet brings things to our everyday level, is wrapped up in this new world dynamic. So Mars and Mercury and Saturn, Mercury's wrapped up with, we still consider Mars and Saturn the malefics in astrology. They're the tough planets, but the results all depends on the aspects and the signs. And Mars is a 2-year cycle too. So Mars will bring this new dynamic in this world-changing way to all of the signs as it transits the entire zodiac over the next 2 years. Mercury is about a year cycle and will also bring its influence to this new era to all of the signs as it transits each one throughout the next year. But it is an alliance, but it's an air and fire alliance, and it's a heavyweight alliance because of Saturn and Mars wrapped up into it. And it's about how the world is going to be taking action and the structures and the systems of the world. I've talked about this a lot before, too. It comes back to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction at the apex, a new 35-year cycle for the world order, the structures and the systems. The old one is dissolving away, and a new one is trying to be built quickly. And it gets help from Gemini and from Aquarius and from Pluto and Uranus. They're helping the situation out. And because these are outer planets, it's beyond us. It's beyond our control. There's something higher that's meant to be, that's shaping the world. And so anyway, that's kind of how I'm looking at that. But just know that Mars, Mercury, and Saturn are in charge of this minor grand trine. And so then we want to look at their relationships and what's going on with them to really understand that minor grand trine, which I do plan on doing additional videos when I can. When I'm trying to change up some things to give my life more time and not do as many readings or reports rather. But I still do reports, and the link is in the description if you do want a report. I'm always booked up at least 2 to 2.5 weeks in advance, nonstop, but that's a pretty short turnaround, relatively speaking. All right, so going back to the list, again, Mars aligns sextile with Neptune and the trine with Pluto. So Mars, our everyday drive, our action, also aligns with power and with something new that motivates and kind of as a spark for what we're going to be working with. Also, just having Mars Uranus is more impulsive for people, especially in this kind of changeable sign, this mutable sign of Gemini. People definitely want to be careful of their impulses and kind of maintain some control, because the energy of unpredictability is just going to be very strong. Now, in the background, all week long, we have this square between the Sun and Saturn building up, which is also a first quarter square between the Sun-Saturn cycle that was started back in late March as the Sun came into Aries for the equinox and made that conjunction. It's a brand new cycle for what focus we're putting on our responsibilities, ambitions, and also what are our limitations for the next year. And now we're reaching a critical point of that cycle that will be exact on next Monday, July 6th, as the Sun squares Saturn perfectly. But it's more than just one day. Again, I think it'll be building up in the background all week long, putting a spotlight on Saturn, these things that we have to deal with, both positive and negative. The positive side is our goals, our ambitions, our work, the things that we need to take time for the next year to really achieve and accomplish, not just quickly, but, again, over the next year, relatively quickly for Saturn. But it's the Sun cycle. And this is the first quarter of the crisis and action phase on, okay, where do we stand with the things that were in focus back in late March into early April, if you can recall that. For the people that write those things down, it's easier to track all this. But if you can remember, it was, again, a seeding moment for the rest of the year, late March into April, about your responsibilities, especially in context of the self, taking responsibility for things and accepting where you have limitations. So some of those limitations and restrictions could start to show up part of this week into next week, showing you, reminding you where you have those limitations. And then there could also be just a more serious, heavier vibe in the background coming up, peaking by Monday with Sun square Saturn. So I'll talk more about that as I'm going through the daily chart. But those are the main aspects. We're coming off that Capricorn full moon. I'm making this video during the full moon. Now the moon this week, so we're entering the second half of the lunar cycle, the waning side of the cycle after the culmination point. That was Monday. It's still a little bit of full moon vibes into Tuesday as well. But the moon will be waning through the rest of Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, and ingress Aries for the last part of this. By next Monday, the moon will ingress Aries. So it's at, there's only a couple conjunctions the moon is going to make this week, one to Pluto and one to the North Node of Destiny. But it'll be making aspects as it always does day by day throughout the week that I'll talk about. And we have this fresh new energy of Jupiter in Leo. All right, so check the description. As always, if you want the list of aspects with the timestamps and when everything comes exact, you can calculate it for your local area based on the Arizona time zone. All right, so with that, I'm going to get started here for Tuesday. Tuesday on June 30th. We start things off really early in the morning with the moon making a square to Saturn. So the moon is still in this, fullness. It's still kind of full moon vibes into Tuesday as well. Things are coming to a head. We are at a turning point with the full moon. Something has to change now from this point forward. And generally, it's speaking about everything that Capricorn rules: business, work, professionalism, goals, ambitions. The mood, the vibes typically are a little more serious with the moon here. Also, Capricorn is all about respect, especially the moon being in Capricorn. It requires respect, and if respect isn't given, it's not going to be a good thing. And so, there's kind of a need to be more respectful to, for how you express yourself and then how you receive too, but also to be punctual. There's stronger morality here, the need for stronger morality, doing what's right, quote, what's right, of what you've been conditioned to think is what's right, how you feel about things. And when you're responsible, when you work hard, when you're committed to things, when you live up to expectations in certain ways, it goes a long way for the mood in this particular dynamic. But it's a lot about goals and ambitions and kind of bringing things to a head this last couple of days of showing us where we stand with work, where we stand with our personal goals and ambitions of the last 6 months. Have you achieved anything? Are you ready to change something about your goals? Or have you, are you changing your mind? It's something different now. So it's a turning point. But it's still the mood, where the moon is, that I always talk about, that rules the general circumstances. For the next few days, it's all about Saturn, because Saturn is in charge of both Capricorn and Aquarius, where the moon is going to be in transit through. So it's just a more serious phase for the world. It also deals more about government and rules and laws and the world and politics and the world itself at a turning point with certain things going on. But the first aspect with the moon square Saturn, again, it's happening pretty early in the morning. So I think that for most people, you'll be sleeping. This is, it is 4:50 a.m. on the West Coast. So it is first thing in the morning. If you're especially a few hours east, waking up first thing in the morning for work. It's a quick aspect, as I say, every week. These moon aspects don't last very long. But square to Saturn can bring a little bit of some downer vibes, something more serious, a little more heavy. Again, we could start to slowly, gradually pick up more and more on some of our limitations and restrictions that we have to accept in some ways, or at least kind of illuminate those things, and then we can decide what is in our control, what's not in our control, what do we have to accept, or what can we change to make better. But it feels a little bit heavy there. It feels a little bit challenging for the general mood and circumstances super early in the morning. And there's only two aspects. That's the main major aspect. And then there's the in conjunction of the moon to Venus as the day goes on here, which is a minor aspect. So all day, the moon is up here in this more serious environment of work and goals and professionalism. So a lot about Tuesday, I think, is coming off this Monday energy of, again, work situations and what do you need to accomplish or let go of or change in those ways. And yet the opposition is to the Sun and Mercury in the home. Safety, security, and comfort and home and family needs. And what's being focused on in this more inner life, emotional life. And it's kind of a turning point to also say, okay, what needs to change in your public environment or your career work environment in order to put more focus on what you need on this foundational level of life? So again, it just kind of bring out something to be aware of, something to see that you can then work with for the next couple weeks. So as the day goes on, it's all about those types of things. And then that moon does make the exact in conjunction to Venus in Leo reaching 20 degrees on Tuesday as the moon reaches 20 degrees. So these two are at odds with each other. Venus and the moon, the two pleasure planets, the two personal planets of enjoyment and emotions and feelings and needs and desires and pleasure and all that. Well, they're on totally different pages. Now, there's something a little bit in common, I would say, with Leo and Capricorn as far as respect. Respect is needed for both of these signs. And then there can be an authority, too, about both of these signs as well. But technically, as the moon makes this in conjunction of Venus, the mood and the circumstances are kind of at odds with where the pleasure is in the zodiac right now, which is in Leo technically, and it's about to get a big boost now that Jupiter is here in Leo as well. So again, Venus in Leo, this is more of a fun, creative side of the chart, wherever you have Leo right now. It comes back to the Sun in Cancer, so it still comes back to this home, family area, or emotions and feelings and the more internal world for now until the Sun reaches Leo. But Venus in Leo, that's where the romance is, that's where the pride, the ego is, the creativity, the heart, the passion, the joy, recreational things, creative things that are more desired for people to have just more fun. It's also a very social sign, and we're going to have a new level of social energy that's going to be expanded for the next year with Jupiter in Leo opposite Aquarius. The moon is headed for that, so that social energy is going to increase as the week goes on. But here, the moon is still in this more serious, grounded, earthly, kind of more of a drier emotional expression. Keep in mind, the moon is considered debilitated here. It's not an easy place for emotions and feelings to express. They don't come out as easy. And Leo is opposite. Leo's not like that. Leo is about expressing yourself creatively, letting people see you, being silly, letting your inner child out and being goofy and stuff, and just playing around. So they're kind of at odds with each other, which means also it's not the greatest moment for fun necessarily. Like there might be a pull into this, I need to have some fun. I need to do something creative, enjoyable, self-expressing or something creatively. And yet we have work to do, or there's business, or there's more of a drier kind of emotional preference going on up here, more serious, more mature, so we have to adjust between these two different energies, that are connecting and not supporting each other in this moment on Tuesday evening, Tuesday night, depending on where you live. This will be exact on at 4:56 p.m. on the West Coast, so it'll be basically Tuesday night if you're on the East Coast. This is called Tuesday night for everybody there, but it only lasts for a few hours. So, there's two planets here in Leo, so there's a possibility that the desire for a more social situation or creative, fun kind of stuff could outweigh the mood that's a little drier, a little more intense and serious. But I can't promise you it's the best moment for a social environment during that aspect. So those are the two aspects for Tuesday. And then we get to Wednesday on July 1st, and the first part of the day, the moon is at the end of Capricorn, about to change signs later on in the day, and the moon is going to start making aspects right off the bat here, because the first aspect is the moon opposite Mercury retrograde. Mercury is still at 26 degrees, so it's literally been stopped here for a few days, as it's stationed retrograde, not moving from the Earth's perspective. And now it's starting to very slowly build up momentum backwards, and it'll come into the 25th degree after we get past Wednesday here. So we're going to start to see, some slow movement on this Mercury. But we still have the background, no matter what the moon is doing all week long, we still have this background of Mars-Uranus in Gemini, that's stirring up a lot of volatility and unpredictability, excitement, and anything can pop off at any moment here, every day of the week. That could be somewhat surprising. But we also, again, we start things off. We have a lot of different aspects here on Wednesday, and we start off with the opposition. So this is like kind of like the final full moon vibes coming into early Wednesday morning. So all of Monday, Tuesday, and into early Wednesday are these illumination kind of vibes about these more serious matters of life. And this is like one of the final culminations because it's opposite Mercury. Something is coming to a head, again, about what has been already coming out and being illuminated on the more serious side of life, of work, goals, ambitions, what needs to change, factoring in both safety, security for your material, physical world and your emotional home and family life. And whatever's coming out with this opposition will lead to more Mercury retrograde, of reflecting and reviewing and kind of understanding and kind of going back and looking at things in a different way, different perspective, plus the fact that Mercury is ruling this conjunction. It's really time to look at things differently. And there could be things that happen throughout the week that kind of help us look at things differently, but when I see, we often say Mercury retrograde is about internalizing. There can be a little bit of that, but it's also when planets are retrograde, there's also like going against the grain, because there's two motions for the heavens. There's, the primary and the secondary motion. All the planets are moving counterclockwise, but space itself is moving all the planets clockwise quicker than they're moving. So it appears that that the planets are moving from the eastern horizon up above through the south and setting in the west. And they are, because space is moving everything that direction, but the planets are actually moving the opposite direction. And so when a planet is retrograde, it's going against the grain of the flow of the other planets. But yet it's now in alignment with the solar system, with space itself, with something bigger beyond us. So it gets different types of perceptions and information that come in when it's retrograde, but it's still retrograde and it's ruling this crazy conjunction. So we could still see things that happen with this Mercury retrograde that are challenging, including traveling issues and transportation issues, and accidents is a big theme of potential with this. But it's all about the local streets, the local things happening around the home and the families that affect home and families. So it has both positive and negative. The positive is, yes, we can start to think very, very differently about things and process it and reflect and review on it all. And the moon is kind of culminating that energy first thing on Wednesday morning. But it's also an opposition, too, between how people are feeling and thinking and communicating themselves. It's not as smooth. There could be pushback, even with the self, with how you're feeling, with how you're thinking about things. But it offers great insight at the same time. And then the next thing will be the moon changing signs. So the moon will be reaching critical degrees first thing in the morning on Wednesday, the end of Capricorn. And then it reaches the 29th degree and it will change signs. The moon will ingress Aquarius, it looks like in the afternoon hours. So the first half of the day, the moon is in Capricorn. Second, the moon is in Aquarius. And this generally does change things, but it also activates something new here. We see that right as the moon comes into Aquarius, it's forming this T-square with Chiron at 0 Taurus at the apex, activating that square between Jupiter and Chiron that will come exact on this day as well later on in the day. But the moon triggers it first thing here in the afternoon with this change of mood, change of flavor of the circumstances. Now, the moon in Aquarius, it's still being ruled by Saturn in Aries. that the sun is slowly building up a square to, that we're coming aware of. Again, responsibilities and limitations and some restrictions and heaviness and weight and pressure and burden that we have to acknowledge. But now this is much more of the social energy, because we're talking about the moon opposite Jupiter and Leo, this fresh new vibe that's coming in. Jupiter's going to try to increase people's need for self-expression and creativity and social energy and putting themselves out there in a more visible, exposed way. And that's going to be part of the issue with this square, most likely. So the moon in Aquarius, it's right next to Pluto. So it intensifies situations, circumstances, emotions, and feelings, just not in the normal, traditional way necessarily. The way people's emotions are being expressed, it's not always traditional with Aquarius. People have their quirks and their little things that they do that are different. And it is an air sign, but it is about now the circumstances for the next 2.5 days are really moving through the energy of friends and communities and politics and organizations and science and technology, and also activating another connection to the minor grand trine that the world is at, of this really great reshaping of the world order that we're not completely seeing finalized yet. And a lot of people will have their opinions if it's positive or if it's negative. I stick with astrology. A lot of people try to make good aspects negative these days as well. This is considered a positive connection in astrology. There's an agreement, there's an alliance here that's coming in on a world order level. Now, again, it may not fit everybody's personal preferences and agenda. So it affects us all differently based on our own birth chart. But there is something quite rare that's developing on the world level here that gets activated in multiple ways at different times. And this is one of those moments, both from Mars and from the temporary, lunar energy of the moon here. But it's still Pluto, so it highlights these power struggles in the world. And Aquarius is where the power is at for the long-term future. We can say that the power is within community, and it is on some level, but it's also on the larger kind of level too of the institutions. Saturn is in charge of this side. So it's like the Elon Musk energy. It's the global kind of community energy, online things, technology, scientists, and, all those bigger energies that are part of our structures and systems of the world. That's where the power is in this new era. So the moon is highlighting, a sense of transformation and change, intensity, power, control issues, undercurrents of things going on that we pick up and feel, and people's own unique emotional expressions that can be very different. Rebelliousness and overall revolution picks up with these two planets and a trine to these two planets. Uranus has revolutionary vibes, and this Pluto in Aquarius has revolutionary vibes, and it's all being triggered here for a new phase as we enter the second half of Wednesday. But the opposition is still big energy to Jupiter. So back to my point that we have this T-square. And the way I'm looking at this is like, again, this is very fresh. This is the last square, as I mentioned before, between Jupiter and Chiron. They were in the other signs, and now they've shifted to these new signs, and then Jupiter will be moving on from this. So it's like Jupiter comes into Leo here now for all of us, and it says we have to step it up. This is the energy that's trying to happen generally, globally for us all, wherever we have Leo in our chart. There's a need to step it up, to be bigger than normal, to put ourselves out there again, to take on something that would result in more exposure, being seen more. Not everybody wants that. Not everybody wants to be a star and on stage and out in front and getting all the attention and stuff. That doesn't fit everybody's vibes. Some people it does. But as this general energy comes in for people to be bigger and expand and take on something, be more passionate, heartfelt, creative, that requires putting out energy and into something new to expand that, well, then it's running into a new wound that has just come into Taurus that talks about people's self-worth and their value. So now it's like, okay, do people feel the value? Do they feel valuable enough to put themselves out there to the next level of life that wants to try to happen with this Leo energy? It could also be in the context of social energy, needing to be more social or be a part of some group or community or organization or social event of some entertainment or performance or whatever it is on an individual level that people are going to be pushed to get out there more. So more social energy, how is that making people feel about themselves? Again, there could be a wound about self-worth and self-value. There could be a wound about the general value that a person has, even material value, money and resources and possessions. And then they could worry about how they feel about themselves, their looks, their sense of beauty and attraction, and how they fit in with the world, the social side of life, because there's going to be something new. There could be some new opportunities over the next year that pushes people into new situations that trigger some of these wounds. Now, this will just be generally for people in the background for the whole world, but it'll be more relevant if it's aligned with your chart. So again, if you do have personal planets here, the inner planets around 0 degrees of the fixed signs, which is Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, then it could be more relevant for you. But this is also going to be pretty quick. Jupiter will be moving on from this aspect. It's not going to stick around. And the moon is pretty quick. So, Chiron will come back and forth through here and then move on as well. But for now, it's 0 degrees if you have a planet at 0 in the fixed signs that you could, pick up on whatever this is talking about for you personally. And again, this triggers the first quarter between Jupiter and Chiron, which is the crisis in action that goes back to their conjunction in 2023 in Aries, a new cycle for how a person is going to grow into a new healing cycle for themselves, about how they feel about the self, and how brave a person feels, how courageous a person feels, what they feel, do they have the value to do what's required next to move forward in life in some big way. And that's what Jupiter's trying to push forward into new things that are more outward, more visible, more exposed for you in the world in some way. And it's triggering this aspect of sensitivity, vulnerability, insecurity, or awkwardness, or just, again, how you feel about your own self-worth and value and material worth and money and resources and things like that. And the moon going through the Aquarius side could bring this out within the community, the friends, in some way. There could be some new sensitivity that comes up in some of your friendships or community connections, or again, your social place that's going to try to be amped up and expanded in new ways, because the North Node will also come into Aquarius, pushing towards that, and there's going to be Jupiter pushing towards Leo. So this axis of Aquarius and Leo is going to have major new life developments. If you do have personal planets in Aquarius and Leo, get ready. This is a part of your life that you've never seen before that's on the way, that's going to push you into new territory with new developments. And this, I'm not saying it's going to happen necessarily right on this day, on Wednesday, July 1st, but this is the beginning of this energy that's starting to come in now. So that's how I'm seeing that T-square that gets triggered, and it could also result in some issues in the world too on Wednesday. There could be some social issues, something dramatic happening is very possible within a community, science, politics, and other entertainment type events. There's also a shadow involved because of Pluto, and it'll be a month from this point that there's a full moon right here that's going to really peak this energy at its strongest. When the sun reaches Jupiter in Leo and the moon with Pluto is opposite for the full moon. It's going to be a very powerful event at the end of July. So after that T-square, the moon is also in conjunct to the South Node. So again, these two positions aren't aligning well. The Virgo, the work, the service, the health, the details, the more practical side of everyday life routine, we're having to adjust to that based on a new phase, a new feeling, new circumstances, or anything else that has changed halfway through the day. So adjusting your community connections with your work and your responsibilities and things. And health could be a part of that as well. Something about health here. But I would generally say every day of the week, we can't escape it. The fact is that this is accident-prone energy here. So you really, even though I'm going to talk more about this when Mars is exactly conjunct Uranus, you still want to be very, very mindful of your instincts and your impulsive actions, because this is generally pretty impulsive. And it's being ruled by this Mercury retrograde. So, there could still be accidents, injuries in the world, major things with community stuff here, just general unpredictability. That be mindful of your surroundings, your local environment. That's where some of the craziness could be most likely happening, and also affecting homes and families in some way. So again, it's already been in the background this last week building up. So we've seen a lot of craziness in the world. And I think that it's continuing. But the moon does make a trine to Mars as the day goes on. And so there does feel like there's this opening for something so new, so different, that people could be connected to on Wednesday evening here when that moon makes the trine. And connects again to this bigger configuration here, the minor grand trine in the sky. That's super rare. That's leading to a whole new reality for the world. That's trying to be structured, this whole last year, this year, and next year. So people could feel, again, more impulsive, more active. Things can be feeling busier and kind of still chaotic, a little bit crazy, and just kind of enhancing all this air energy, mental energy, communications, mind, group, community energy, and intensity because of the Pluto and Uranus. And then we do get the exact Jupiter square Chiron. So again, this is something new, but it's also something that's going to be moving on. It's the ending. And the first quarter, it's like, okay, what I talked about before, looking at what's holding you back from going bigger, from expanding to being more heartfelt, passionate, creative, stepping into more joy, happiness overall. Or what's holding you back from just being larger than, keeping yourself small in some way? What is the wound, or what is the issue? That's how I'm looking at that. It's triggering something for people here. Now, Venus is in charge of where Chiron is in Taurus. And Venus is at 21 degrees of Leo, which isn't making an aspect to anything really at this point. So that's a good sign that Venus isn't having a difficult aspect. And then the sun is in charge of Jupiter now, because Jupiter is in Leo, the sun's house. So in a way, the sun is hosting Jupiter for the next year. And the sun is in Cancer, so it comes back to home and family, safety, security, comfort, and emotions and feelings and needs in that inner world, but also that sun building up the square to Saturn. It's now within just over 4 degrees. So coming in stronger and stronger each day. So it's still in the background, feeling that pressure too. So playing it safe versus being more bold and outward and going bigger on something in life. So could bring up some, again, sensitivity for some people there with that square. And then for the rest of the day, the rest of the night, I should say, the moon is, again, activating the minor grand trine, kind of showing that whatever we see happening on the world stage Wednesday night is connected to this bigger configuration that's reshaping the world order and the overall reality that will be a part of generations to come. Now, we're not seeing the full results, so keep that in mind, but it's one part of the activation on Wednesday night. So we're having opportunities to look at things to get, it says that there's opportunities now coming in that weren't available before that we have. But these are sextiles. And when it comes to the sextiles, you have to take action. You have to make them happen. Plus, it's the apex is Aries, the sign of initiation and taking charge and making things happen for the self. Don't just expect it to, some major thing to drop in your lap. There could be new opportunities available that weren't available before, but it still requires your own action, your own ability to make something happen for yourself here by being able to recognize the opportunities first and seeing what's there that's available that wasn't there before. So again, the moon will come through here month after month after month, for the next 2 years, activating this. So we have lots of time to still work with this. It's not just a one quick thing. So you have time, but hopefully you can recognize where it is in your personal life that you have some new opportunity that requires some bravery and courage and initiation to make it happen. And it should be wherever you have Aries, Aquarius, and Gemini, because there is an alliance. These three signs are helping each other out. And normally, Saturn is debilitated in Aries. Normally, when a planet is debilitated, it kind of shows that the planet, the person that's in charge of the planet, or that's a part of the life, but in this case, it's the world, there's usually not as much of an opportunity to be successful at what's trying to be built or structured, that Saturn is talking about. And so on the whole world level being restructured, there's that Saturn in debilitation. However, it's getting help. Again, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction was in a sextile with Uranus and Pluto. So Pluto and Uranus are helping out Saturn to be stronger than it otherwise would be. But it still has its issues. It's still not perfect. It's still going to take time, and there's still this larger process in play here. Excuse the background. The winds are howling again, and it's very turbulent, which fits Uranus and Mars. Everybody's own personal environment will have its own issues, or wherever you have Gemini in your chart. Okay, so that's Wednesday night, and the last aspect on late Wednesday night will be the moon conjunct Pluto. So that's the most intense part of it by Wednesday, super late into Thursday morning. And again, it talks about picking up on the power dynamics, picking up on the undercurrents, the shadow, intensity, emotional intensity, but it's not always about crying with your blanket on the couch with Aquarius moon. It can just, people's own emotions can play out in different unique ways. And power struggles with the community, with friends and stuff, and just picking up on the undercurrents very easily if you are in a community setting. All right, that's the last aspect. And then we get to Thursday on July 2nd. Just one major aspect and one minor aspect. The minor one is the moon in Aquarius continuing its transit here through the community, group, politics, science, the intellectual side of life, to be more objective, trying to be more detached, even though it's next to Pluto, which can still amplify emotions and intensity for Thursday. And then the moon is in conjunct to the sun, and that's one of the main aspects for the day. So the mood, feelings, and circumstances totally at odds with where the focus is. These two signs are very different. A water sign of Cancer, where the focus is, that's much more sensitive and emotional and guarded and protective, and puts more focus on home and family, and again, safety, security, and comfort in that inner foundational world. That's more feeling based, but it's being applied through the moon in Aquarius, which has its own unique style of showing and feeling of emotions and doing emotions with community and friends. And this position generally wants not to go too deep. It wants to be more detached and intellectual, but the sun is in this more emotional placement. So it's like, again, the inner world, how people are feeling emotionally, just kind of at odds with kind of what they're focused on and how they're focused on certain things throughout the day, the background energy for the world on Thursday. And then the moon is making a sextile to Saturn. So versus the square that started off this week's report, now the moon is in harmony with Saturn on Thursday evening, Thursday night, depending on where you live. And again, Saturn is slowing down. Saturn's going to go retrograde halfway through 14 degrees of Aries. So it's already in its degree, its stationary degree. But it's going to be stuck here a while. So it's becoming more amplified as it slows down and more in focus from the sun. But in this moment, for a few hours on Thursday night, we're in better connection with it emotionally. People can feel more responsible, more mature, more grounded, or working with limitation a little better, feeling okay about some of these pressures and responsibilities or limitations that are going to be highlighted more and more as the sun builds that square. So I would say Thursday night can be a good practical night to be working with practicality and more reason and logic and maturity in those kind of decisions, and with group and friends and community. Can have a more serious intellectual vibe about it. But the moon is also building that opposition to Venus, but that won't be on Thursday. That'll be the following day. So really just those two aspects for Thursday. And we still have the background though, regardless of where the moon is on Thursday, Mars is right next to Uranus. So we still have the potential for volatility and unpredictability on the streets with media, communications, technology, glitches, breakdowns are possible here any day of the week because of the Mercury retrograde connected to this. Issues in your surrounding area that again affects your feeling of comfort in the home area, things that happen generally, conversations, information, can trigger new thoughts, new ideas any day of the week. And again, that's going to be peaking here as we move forward and we get to Friday on July 3. The first aspect is the moon in the last degrees of Aquarius, making an in conjunction to, Jupiter. Jupiter at the beginning of Leo, making an in conjunction to the North Node of Destiny at the 0 degree mark. So if you do have 0 degrees of Pisces or Virgo, you are wrapped up in the nodes of fate, which in this particular way only happens every 18 and a half to 19 years. So if you have 0 degrees of Pisces, something about your destiny is being activated for your future. And if you have 0 degrees of Virgo, something from the past, something is being let go of, something is changing that you're connected to in a powerful way that's fateful, from the past, or something that's happening currently that will be about letting go of something. But regardless, if you have 0 Virgo or Pisces in your chart, then you're wrapped up in fate and destiny this week. And then if you have 0 degrees of Sagittarius or 0 degrees of Gemini, you're also wrapped up in the nodes of fate at a crossroads in some way. And Mars triggering that, this week. All right, so Jupiter in conjunct to the North Node, that North Node in Pisces, it's the last bit of this that's still pulling people into the Piscean realm, which I look at as the invisible world is what Pisces is in charge of. And Pisces deals with everything that's hidden behind the scenes, energetically sensitive, and it's the house that influences everybody privately, secretly. It's the realm where spirits roam, and all these energetic, invisible connections of influence over us. And it's also our own world, and that North Node can be pulling people in to our own world. And yet Jupiter is now in Leo, a more outward social area, generally Leo. Again, something brighter, something more outward of being visible and seen, and trying to expand the heart and the passion and the joy and the creativity and certain things that are more outward. Yet we have to adjust to this pull or distractions or other influences that we're picking up on strongly. So it's like these two different areas are a little bit at odds with each other here at first. It's also part of, again, the inner world versus the outer world, emotions and feelings. Versus, again, being more seen, being bigger than you've been in the past, letting the world see you in new ways. And then the moon in Aquarius, still talking about group, friends, community, intellectual energy. People's emotions aren't just traditional and normal necessarily, but that moon reaches the opposition with Venus. That's another culmination point. But it's still, the moon is as far away from Venus as possible during this phase of the moon. And, they're so far away from each other. The emotional pleasure, the emotional needs and desires, they're in opposition, but it's also an extremely social opposition. Aquarius and Leo opposition. It rules the social environment, entertainment, performance, groups of people and community, and it can be definitely a very social energy for people, generally speaking here. And I would say if you have a planet around 23 degrees of Leo or Aquarius, it could be more relevant for you than for some other people. But it's also, not always the best alignment for 100% feeling satisfied and content and pleasured in every best way possible. So it still has a little bit of an opposition vibe about it, of what we feel and what we desire and social and relationship stuff and pleasure dynamics. It's like a give and a take a little bit in some way with you versus others. Venus here wants heart and passion and more drama and excitement and fun. The moon in Aquarius is a little more chill, wants a little more space, doesn't want to get too sappy. And also kind of wants to be more humble, whereas Venus in Leo is more prideful, has more ego, and that's okay. That's a part of the process. But, again, these two different signs in opposition on Friday, late morning into the afternoon, depending on where you live. So we have that dynamic, and then we have the moon making an in conjunction to Mercury pretty much at the same time. So we're also having to factor in this adjustment with our thoughts, our feelings that are being focused on here in the inward life. Again, the emotions, the sensitivity, the need for safety, being more guarded and protective and having that shell over us to feel safe versus the more outward life of the social activity. Again, they're clashing. How people are communicating, thinking versus feeling. A little bit of an adjustment there. And sometimes it's a little bit irritating as well with the in conjunction. All right, and then we get the Mars-Uranus perfect conjunction late on Friday here on July, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So I am speaking about Friday if I failed to mention that, July 3 for these aspects. But it's late on Friday that we get the exact perfect conjunction. And again, it doesn't always mean that there'll be something right at the moment of this. Again, it can be any day of the week that this energy is playing out. But it is perfect as we see that the moon changes signs as the Mars-Uranus conjunction is perfect. So the moon is reaching critical degrees late on Friday night, and a sense of urgency happens, and then a big mood change happens, and it's quite fateful and destined, because right as this conjunction of Mars-Uranus is happening, the moon is conjunct the North Node of Destiny. And again, this is all on super late Friday into early morning hours of Saturday on July 4th. So Friday night and Saturday, they look like the most critical. They look like they could be the most chaotic and surprisable or something here, that's showing people's emotions are changing. Now, all of a sudden, people's emotions, generally the world, the background energy is shifting into a lot of sensitivity. But also, again, what I described about Pisces, generally, it's the collective. It's the invisible influences that everybody is being affected by, influenced by. And that's the new transit for the next 2.5 days is where all that's taking place. The pull into people's own world, behind the scenes, issues about water, the ocean could come up here. Again, now, one of the conjunctions of Mars-Uranus in Gemini, it was January 15, 1944, a huge earthquake, but because we've already been seeing so many earthquakes, I would say that the odds are low that we would see another huge one like we saw in Venezuela or something. It's possible because it's a signature of this, of unpredictability in the local streets, the local region that shakes things up, so, but the fact that so much pressure has already been relieved, through multiple big earthquakes this last week, maybe it's not going to have the same power. Maybe we already saw it, but there's always a chance. But in the bigger scheme, it's also, like I was saying, a brand new cycle for the next 2 years on what's going to motivate us, what's triggering something that we need to take action on in a way that's different from the past. So it's planting seeds for the rest of the weekend and into next week of what this is going to be talking about. It wants to liberate us in some way. What do we have to be liberated from of the past? What is your Gemini area of life for you? What does Gemini rule for you? What area is it? That area wants to go through revolutionary changes in a big, excitable way here. And now this is happening at late 3 degrees, almost 4 degrees. So I would say if you have 3, 4, 5 degrees of Gemini, you're most affected, especially about 4 degrees. About 4 degrees of Gemini. If you have that in your chart, you're connected to this bigger dynamic in the world with Neptune and Pluto aspecting your personal planet plus Uranus. All the outer planets are basically on your aspecting your personal planet if you do have 3 or 4 Gemini in your chart. And now Mars is really triggering it and activating it. So there's a liberation vibe. There's a revolutionary change that wants to happen wherever you have Gemini. And in this context, the general context, again, it's a change for everything that all these mutable signs talk about that I've kind of explained a little bit in the past, beliefs and faith and understanding, education, data, information, facts, media, news, the local streets, transportation and traveling, both far and local. The Pisces influence of scandals and conspiracies and things that happen secretly behind the scenes that affects the world, and imagination and creativity for people and people's self-undoing, all the negative things that Pisces is associated with, like self-sabotaging, being the martyr, all the more negative sides of it. And then Virgo, work and service and health life and how it's trying to be restructured for the future, but health in a big way. This Uranus transit is going to change the overall world perspective about health over this next 7 years. And this could be one trigger on all these different types of things, that Mars is bringing up for people. And then it's the mind. It's how people communicate. People are going to be much more blunt and radical and say things without thinking about them necessarily. And there's a little bit of a guardedness, a protectiveness about it because it comes back to Mercury in Cancer, retrograde. And again, that's more of a guarded position. But it also shows that, again, I've said this over and over, but it's like this local environment, the local streets and things that are happening that could be surprising are affecting people's homes and families and people's safety, security, and comfort. And that's earthquakes do that as well. And other surprising events in the local areas. And it can be different. Every region could have something different about what's happening in the local environment. Maybe it doesn't affect you. Maybe there's nothing in your local environment, your neighborhood, or it can bring up surprising, shocking events for some people, not everybody, but for some people in their relationships with their siblings or other extended family in some way. Because again, it has a family connection as well. But your local neighborhood could go through changes, construction, again, and there could be these other shocking events that could just come out of the blue. But again, this can also be traveling and transportation issues and breakdowns of some type, or even, air travel. I have a chart for aviation. It's Aquarius and Gemini, basically. But there could definitely be traveling issues with this for sure. So you want to be, more mindful when you're driving and mostly mindful of everybody else around you, because there's an unpredictability about people. There could be road rage with this type of a conjunction very easily. Road rage. So things like that. But again, the mood comes into this more sensitive placement, pulling people into their own world, or whatever's happening here on Friday night. It's fateful. It's destined. Again, it's activating another round of the world at a fateful crossroads. And we're having to adjust again to that Jupiter that wants to go big and expand ourselves into more visible outward place for whatever next, that's going to inspire people. And again, this is a brand new cycle for the next 2 years for the activity that will take place in your Gemini area of life. That's going to be radical in some way. All right, so that's what I'm seeing with that. Let me check my time here. Okay, I'm already way behind here. So moving forward, let's get to Saturday, and this is the holiday, July 4th in the United States. So the fact is on the 4th of July here on Saturday, the moon is in Pisces squaring Uranus and Mars conjunction. As Mars, is aligned with these outer planets as well. And I would say that there's mostly difficult aspects on July 4th. Now, the circumstances now are no longer being ruled by Saturn. Now they're being ruled by this Jupiter that is much more social and grand and expansive and more about entertainment, and it fits the overall 4th of July vibe. But the square, now this square is taking place pretty early in the morning. So again, most of the tension is actually playing out on Friday night into Saturday morning. However, it's possible it could expand all day on Saturday, since Mars is still right there next to Uranus, being ruled by Mercury. Mercury's now finally moving, backwards from our perspective. But the moon squaring Mars and Uranus just adds more tension to this dynamic from behind the scenes. So there's still a strong potential of something happening here on the 4th of July. Hopefully not. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean it will for sure, but the fact that the moon is making an aspect, it gives it more odds for some sort of volatility here on Saturday. Maybe more on Friday night into Saturday morning, but I wouldn't be surprised at any part of Saturday. Some tension in this process. So again, everything I've already talked about, the local streets, the environment, sometimes this can kind of be an attack of some type, a surprise attack. Other times it's more of like a planning of a surprise attack that will come later, but it's definitely the beginning of something that will be happening as time goes on, even if we don't see it right here on Friday or Saturday. But there's a stronger possibility of something happening that's a little more unpredictable because of the moon square, because it also wraps people's emotions into being more impulsive. So that's the thing I'd be the most concerned about and the most conscious of, is your unpredictable actions. So as long as you're, keeping yourself in check and not being, too crazy, then you're probably fine. But it's also about your surrounding environments and just making sure that you're not wrapped up in any kind of drama that other people are instigating around you. Could be accidents. You could have something to say about either ocean or water events, or it could also, it could be so many things. Like generally this Gemini side is more about like trains, automobiles, even airplanes. It can be any form of traveling. The Pisces can also add something more about oil, gas, ocean, water events, storms, fumes of some type, though, like chemicals or other things like that. Let's see here. Yeah, plus that Jupiter Chiron square is still strong in the background. There's just some potential for some crazy accident or Earth event or other unpredictable man-made situation that pops off here. So I don't want people not to have a good time. If you like to celebrate, if you want to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States, please do, because it's not going to be every single place in the world that has something crazy. It's probably just going to be maybe a couple headlines or something in the world, but and of course there's going to be all the people that work against the celebration of the United States, which hopefully aren't Americans, but there will be. So there's going to be just some crazy energy around this day of the 4th of July. So expect fireworks, all right. I would say expect something to be a little bit different. Now, maybe nothing happens. There's always these aspects that we think could really produce some major event, and sometimes they don't, because again, there could be a seeding moment where something's going to be planned or something will develop later on based on the cycle that then begins to move forward. But I still think because the moon is involved, it's more likely to show something going on here Friday into Saturday. So with that, we have those strong dynamics of changeable emotions and intensity and agitation and some conflict and some craziness, wildness, revolutionary energy, people's impulsiveness. And then the last aspect is Mars making a sextile to Neptune, tapping in to some sort of dream, fantasy, inspiration that's driving action, impulsiveness, working with it better. But it's that bigger minor grand trine that Mars is also activating, that's talking about the world and what the world is shaping into. So there's developments about the world most likely this week into the weekend with this dynamic. All right, moving along here, we get to Sunday, or actually all day on Saturday. That moon is waning through Pisces in the background. Until we get to Sunday, the moon is halfway through Pisces by Sunday, July 5th. And the moon trines the sun for the first aspect. And actually on Sunday, there's only 3 aspects, all trines, which are more flowing, easier aspects of cooperation between the different planets. But with Mars, Mars is still within this volatility aspect at the same time. But the moon trine the sun, now people's emotions and feelings, which are sensitive, are more in alignment with the sun, where the sun is, which is sensitive. And yet the sun is now about to make that perfect square to Saturn by Monday. So it's already very, very strong. So even all through the weekend, we have this background energy of the sun square Saturn, something more serious, heavier, which could be based on something that happens with this Mars-Uranus. But at least the moon and the sun are in alignment. There's more of a flow in the more private emotional sides of the chart, behind the scenes, privately. That's where things are flowing emotionally pretty strong. And then the Mars trine Pluto aspect is in play all day on Sunday. So Mars has, again, this connection to the outer planets. All of the outer planets affecting how we take action, what motivates us, what drives us, what potentials are there and available for something very new and different. So Pluto, Mars can just add more intensity to the dynamic, add more power, determination, resourcefulness, so it could be big stuff. And it could also be military events. That's probably one thing it'll be too, I would imagine, is, maybe there'll be some other strike, military strike, or it could also lead to a change of military operations or something for the future that's going to be happening with the military. But it feels like military is being activated in some rare way as well this weekend. Generally, of course. And then the moon is trine Mercury. So this, again, is where the feelings, the circumstances are in better alignment with how we're feeling and thinking about things that we're still needing to kind of review and reflect on that have been coming up all week. So that's Sunday. Things feel a little bit easier, and yet there's still pressure and tension in the world in the background no matter what. And then that peaks as we get to Monday on July 6th. This is the day where the sun is square Saturn, the first quarter square that goes back to late March with a brand new cycle that was focused on what are we committed to, especially in a self-oriented way of initiating things for ourselves, taking self-responsibility, and also accepting where we have certain restrictions and limitations that are kind of being shown here, perhaps by Monday, if not before this, but it's exact here. So there again, it kind of just puts more pressure in the air. It puts more tension and weight and a little bit of burden and sometimes a feeling of feeling restricted and limited on what we can be doing right now. But because it's a first quarter, it's a crisis in action between how to move our responsibilities forward of how we're focused on things. And that includes not only what we have to do for the self, but how is family affected by this and home and your need for safety and security versus being brave and courageous and taking a risk and doing something on a bigger scale of life that requires a lot of work and effort and time, versus playing it safe and wanting to be comfortable and in your own home environment, or, just kind of the emotions and the feelings of things versus what you need to be doing and accepting and embracing of kind of taking on next level maturity for your life and what you're responsible for. So again, it's a combination of having to face certain responsibilities and commitments and duties and obligations, and then also, again, maybe highlighting where we feel restricted and limited, and then where we feel burdened, what's holding us back, what do we have to do to change something to move past this issue and be able to move forward with something that feels tough or challenged in some way here. Sometimes the sun square Saturn can also just generally show a weaker vitality, and yet Mars over here is all being stimulated, but it's a lot about mental stimulation and thoughts and ideas and media communications, and there's still a busy active energy for sure. Things are definitely accelerated, things are fast, things are kind of changeable and all over the place, and yet the vitality of energy or the consciousness of people could have a little bit of a weaker connection to it, or feeling tired or drained or limited or restricted, or not wanting to step out of the safe zone, wanting to be in that safe place. And that pressure could be a part of, I need to step out, I need to do these bigger things, and yet not feeling it or something. And then I would say it can just generally be a little bit of a downer for health for some people. Sun square Saturn, it can also lower one's confidence sometimes and the ability to shine bright and be a leader and take on responsibilities and challenges to overcome and things. So it's like kind of those background vibes that people have to work on. Now, I think people most affected are people with 14 degrees of one of the cardinal signs, because you're already getting this extended Saturn transit. This is also kind of triggering where Saturn isn't going to be moving much further. It's going to be hanging around this spot now until it slowly builds up enough momentum after its retrograde to start moving backwards again. So it's going to be stuck here around 14 degrees. And if you have 14 Capricorn, 14 Aries, 14 Cancer, 14 Libra, then you're under a rare Saturn transit. And the sun is really bringing it down for you to see and deal with and kind of understand what this Saturn is talking about. That requires you to have, sometimes Saturn transits, it doesn't always have to be one major big event. There can be big events that you have to deal with in life sometimes, but it can also just be a phase where life is generally harder. It's not as easy. You don't get as many breaks and luck, and things are just more challenged generally, even if there's not one big thing that happens. And so generally that might be the background energy. Things are just harder when Saturn is under a square like this. And that's peaking on Monday. So that's one of the main aspects for Monday. And then the moon is also in conjunct to Venus as it's at the last degrees of Pisces before it changes signs later on in the day. And so that's, again, where mood and feelings are at odds with desire and pleasure and relationship. They're kind of clashing. But then the moon will come into Aries, and it's a whole different vibe for the rest of the day after the moon ingresses Aries. Because now this is the world point again. A lot of world developments are showing. And it's a new phase for emotions and feelings to be more impulsive, instinctive. Now it's being ruled by this Mars in Gemini. Once again, things speed up. Things are more crazy, more changeable, a little more all over the place with variety, and a lot of more excitement comes in now. And it's just also kind of a phase that says people generally want more freedom, more independence, and have more of an impulsiveness to do what they want to do personally. But it also, again, activates the minor grand trine of the world development, this new world reality, and what is being shaped and built for the new world rule of the law of the land on a global scale. All right, so there's that. And then there'll be a lot more lunar trines for the rest of the day and sextiles as the moon connects to all those outer planets. So again, a lot of things are connected for Monday, for the second half of the day to be easier, more active, busier. There still could be some frustration as the moon in Aries wants to be very busy and active and independent, but it's also applying towards Neptune and Saturn, plus the sun separating from Saturn. So we could start to, feel some of those limitations. And by next week, for next week's report, the moon will square the sun from Aries to Cancer for the last quarter moon. So the moon is almost half empty by this point, and we're running into this challenge here between Sun and Saturn for Monday into Tuesday. But yet, everything is connected on this bigger level of life, of what's motivating people and driving people for the next 2 years. All right, so that's what I have for you for this week's report. If you like my video, hit that like button. Thanks for watching. I wish you a great